Stormy Jones suffered from a rare genetic condition where her liver was unable to remove cholesterol, raising her cholesterol to 7 times the normal level for her age and resulting in 2 heart attacks before she turned 6. In 1984, she became the world's first successful recipient of a simultaneous heart and liver transplant. Her life was miraculously extended by another 7 years, but she tragically passed away in 1990 at the age of 13. Taylor Mitchell was a 19-year-old folk musician from Canada who was attacked and killed by 2 coyotes during a hike in 2009. She is currently the only documented adult to have been killed by coyotes. After President John Adams' daughter Abigail was diagnosed with breast cancer, she had a mastectomy performed on her with a fork, wooden razor, and a spatula. Without anesthesia, the breast was fully removed, only to reveal that the cancer had spread to her lymph nodes. So the doctors had to slice out those tumors as well. To stop the bleeding, the wound was cauterized using the heated spatula, and the entire surgery only took about 25 minutes. Everyone was amazed that she never cried out in pain during the brutal operation, but she tragically died from the same cancer just 2 years later. When he was a young boy, actor Terrence Howard witnessed his dad stab a man to death while they were waiting in line to take pictures with Santa Claus at a department store in what became known as the Santa line slaying. The victim, who was also with his family, reportedly made a racist comment to Terrence's father Tyrone after he thought he cut the line, which quickly escalated to a fatal fight. Tyrone was arrested and pleaded self-defense since the other man attacked first and was sentenced to 11 months in prison. After a deadly Peruvian avalanche in 1962, 2 American climbers traveled down to investigate and later warned Peruvian authorities that there is a threat of a much larger avalanche just waiting to happen. These warnings were not only ignored but actively suppressed by the Peruvian government, as the climbers were accused of fear-mongering and anyone who even mentioned their research was arrested. 8 years later, the deadliest avalanche in history occurred there, completely destroying the town of Yungay while killing over 30,000 people. Ben Wolf, who played Infantata and Meep in American Horror Story, tragically died in 2015 at the age of 34. The 4'4" actor was crossing the street in Hollywood before he was struck in the head by a car mirror when the driver apparently didn't see him. Wolf was rushed to the nearest hospital before succumbing to a resulting stroke. This heartbreaking video shows a zoo bear still walking in circles 7 years after being freed from the small cage she was kept in for 2 decades. In July of 2023, 57-year-old Barry Griffiths suddenly died after accidentally stabbing himself in the stomach while trying to separate 2 burger patties that were frozen. In 2002, 15-year-old Kara Robinson was kidnapped by serial killer Richard Ivanitz and subjected to 18 hours of abuse. But she managed to escape after manipulating Ivanitz to feel at ease and memorize the details of her surroundings before running off. Robinson was then able to give police a detailed description of the home, which allowed them to bring the serial killer to justice. As a children's hospital worker in Tennessee, Georgia Tan would lie to new mothers and tell them their babies died after childbirth, only to turn around and sell them to whomever was willing to pay top dollar. She eventually became a millionaire thanks to this sick scheme, as it's estimated that she stole more than 5,000 babies over a 26-year span, one of which grew up to become professional wrestler Ric Flair. Unfortunately, Georgia passed away in 1950, just months before her awful crimes were uncovered. In 2023, gifted pianist Marlena Mashinska absolutely lost it when her partner said he didn't want to have intercourse with her. After the man fell asleep, she dumped bleach on his head and tried to slice off his willy but missed and sliced his thigh instead. The man was able to escape before calling police, and as Marlena was being arrested, she asked the officers if her partner's genitals were still intact. She was eventually sentenced to 7 years in prison. In 2006, 40-year-old actress Adrienne Shelley was found dead in her apartment bathroom, hanging from a shower rod in the bathtub with a bedsheet around her neck. It was later determined that Shelley was murdered by a construction worker who was trying to rob her. After breaking into her home, the 19-year-old had accidentally knocked her unconscious while covering her mouth to prevent her from screaming, but decided to kill her and make it look like a suicide out of fear of getting caught and sent back to Ecuador since he was an illegal immigrant. When the Goths attacked Constantinople in 378 AD, they were left stunned when one of the defenders stormed out of the city completely naked, decapitated one of the attackers, and proceeded to drink the blood flowing from his neck. Shortly after witnessing this, the Goths retreated in horror. During a 1900 college football game in San Francisco, hundreds of fans climbed on the roof of a glass factory to watch the game. but the roof wasn't built to support so much weight and eventually collapsed, dumping the fans into a scorching hot glass furnace where 22 of them died horribly and hundreds more were injured. Despite the tragedy, the game was never paused. In 1981, Japanese college student Issei Sagawa murdered the female student he was studying with, and then spent the next 2 days consuming her flesh to absorb her health and beauty, characteristics which he felt he lacked. A French court soon found him legally insane and deported him to Japan, where Sagawa avoided serving any jail time due to a legal technicality. Despite the gruesome details of the murder and his lack of remorse, Sagawa became somewhat of a celebrity and gave interviews in the years following his release. To this day, he remains free and even says he wants to taste human flesh again before he dies. Considered by many to be the most prolific serial killer and rapist in recorded history, Pedro Lopez raped and killed over 300 young girls throughout several South American countries in the 70s. He was found guilty on 110 counts of murder and sentenced to 16 years in prison, Ecuador's highest form of punishment. After later being held in a psychiatric hospital, he was released on bail in 1998 and has remained missing ever since. He's likely still committing horrible atrocities to this day, as his current whereabouts are unknown. Nicknamed the Merchant of Death, Russian arms dealer Viktor Bout rose to power after the fall of the Soviet Union in the early 90s. Using his fleet of 60 cargo planes, the arms he's brokered have helped fuel conflicts in countries including Afghanistan, Angola, the Democratic Republic of Congo, Somalia, Liberia, Rwanda, Sudan, and Sierra Leone. Willing to sell guns to anyone who wanted them, Bout has supplied both sides of civil wars and is said to be responsible for the deaths of tens of millions of people. He was arrested in 2008 during a sting operation, where he was caught selling surface-to-air missiles that would have been used to kill American troops. But Viktor Bout is now free and back in Russia thanks to a prisoner swap for WNBA player Brittany Griner, who was arrested a few years ago after trying to bring a THC cartridge on a Russian airplane. In 2021, Lady Gaga's dog walker Ryan Fisher was walking 3 of her French bulldogs in Hollywood when he was suddenly attacked by 2 men. After being shot in the chest, which resulted in permanent damage including the partial loss of a lung, he still tried to protect the dogs, but 2 of them were taken. Gaga later offered a $500K reward for the return of her pets, and 2 days later, a woman brought the dogs to an LA police station. The woman was later arrested along with 4 others in connection with the crime and tried to sue Gaga for not paying the reward money, asking for the $500K plus another $15 million for financial damages, pain and suffering, mental anguish, loss of enjoyment of life, and legal fees. She claimed that she never would have returned the dogs if not for the promised reward, and was therefore defrauded because she ended up with no dogs and no reward. The woman ended up losing the case, while shooter James Jackson pleaded no contest to attempted murder and was sentenced to 21 years in prison. Mel Blanc, the voice of Bugs Bunny and many more, started smoking at age 9 and changed his name from Blanc to Blanc after a teacher told him he would amount to nothing just like his name. He was once involved in a head-on collision at a Sunset Boulevard intersection known as Dead Man's Curve, a spot notorious for accidents. The crash resulted in a 2-week coma, and he was completely non-responsive until a doctor decided to ask him, "How are you feeling today, Bugs Bunny?" Blanc then responded to him in the voice of Bugs, and thus woke up from the coma. This also happened in the middle of production for season 1 of The Flintstones, for which Blanc was the voice of Barney Rubble. So during his stay in the hospital, the other actors would crowd around his hospital bed to record their lines. Around 40 episodes of The Flintstones were recorded in this manner. After the legendary voice actor died from heart disease and emphysema in 1989, his tombstone read, "That's all, folks." Atticus Shaffer, who played Brick in Modern Family, has type 4 osteogenesis imperfecta, aka brittle bone disease. The painful disorder prevents his body from building strong bones, causing his bones to break rather easily even from minor trauma. The 4'8" actor has fractured his bones countless times and received dozens of plates, rods, and screws in his legs. Despite this, Shaffer has noted that his struggles with the genetic disorder have helped him become more empathetic and compassionate as he's had to constantly overcome extreme pain. In 2014, some sick piece of human garbage glued dozens of razor blades to playground equipment at a park in Illinois. Several children cut themselves while climbing the monkey bars or using the slide, but the perpetrator was never caught. In 2012, a married cop from Atlanta named William Martinez died from a heart attack while having a threesome with his friend and a woman who wasn't his wife. Afterwards, Martinez's wife was awarded $3 million in a malpractice lawsuit when the jury found that his doctor didn't properly diagnose his heart condition or warn him to end all physical activity until further testing was completed. There's a very popular urban legend that claims Walt Disney had his head cryogenically frozen immediately after he died, with the hope that he could be revived in the future when technology makes it possible. This was done because Walt Disney's brain and creative ideas were far too valuable to let die. His head is rumored to be hidden underneath Disneyland's Pirates of the Caribbean ride or Cinderella's castle. Believers in this theory point to Disney on Ice and the movie Frozen as deliberate attempts by the Disney company to cover up people searching about Walt's frozen head. Over the years, many fans have questioned why Tarzan wears a loincloth even though he was raised by gorillas and should therefore have no concept of clothing. According to one popular theory, it's because he's embarrassed about his massive hammer. Humans are known to have proportionally much longer members than other species of apes, likely as an adaptation from walking upright. Meanwhile, gorilla schlongs can only reach about 2.5 inches at their longest. So Tarzan probably started wearing the loincloth after being viciously bullied for his oversized prick upon reaching puberty. There's a theory that states Breaking Bad is a sequel to Malcolm in the Middle, but Walter White isn't Hal, he's a grown-up version of Malcolm. For starters, for those who don't know, Malcolm's dad in the show Hal is actually played by Bryan Cranston, so it's completely reasonable to assume that Malcolm would grow up to look like him. In the sitcom, Malcolm is very fond of chemistry, and in one episode he even uses a chemistry set to create an explosion. Malcolm is also incredibly smart, stubborn, manipulative, and can develop complex plans just like Walter White. Not to mention Walter is also estranged from his mother throughout Breaking Bad, alluding to the idea that Malcolm eventually wanted nothing to do with Lois. Additionally, Malcolm's grandfather happens to be named Walter, and he's the only family member who openly appreciates Malcolm's genius. So the theory posits that Malcolm changed his name to Walter as a tribute to his late grandfather, and at some point moved down to Albuquerque to escape from his crazy family. Fans of the show Hey Arnold have always questioned why Arnold lives with his grandparents while the show makes no mention of his actual parents. People have theorized that it's because Arnold's grandparents are his true parents and lied to him about his parents being explorers. Arnold's football-shaped head is merely a case of hydrocephalus, a birth defect that causes fluid to build up in the brain. Since the risk of birth defects can significantly increase among older couples, Arnold's grandparents likely blamed themselves for his condition and couldn't bear to tell him the truth about his parentage. The theory even goes so far as to say his name came from a form of hydrocephalus called Arnold-Chiari malformation. As a result of his condition, Arnold was bullied and had no friends, so all the characters in the series are simply a product of his imagination. The theory points out that the rest of the characters also have oddly shaped heads, and that Arnold imagined them this way so that he could feel normal. The Rugrats Never Happened theory states that the Rugrats were all a figment of Angelica's imagination, invented by her to cope with her parents being absent from her life. Proponents of this theory list tragic backstories for each of the babies. Chucky died in 1986 along with his mother, explaining why Chaz is always such a nervous wreck. Tommy was stillborn in 1988, which explains why Stu is always making toys in his basement as a coping mechanism for the son he never had. The DeVilles had an abortion in 1990, and Angelica couldn't figure out whether the baby would be a boy or a girl, so she created the twins Phil and Lil. Eventually, Angelica grew up and stopped having these delusions, until she began experimenting with various narcotics in her teenage years, bringing her back to her childhood and the creations she'd obsessed over. This would explain how all the Rugrats return in the sequel series All Grown Up.